So today we're going to be talking about Q1 stats. Now, there's something that I always like to say is that the numbers don't lie. You could sit there and tell me I'm the busiest ever. I'm so crazy. I'm amazing, blah, blah, blah. And you can also say, oh, the market's just so terrible. I'm doing so bad. It doesn't matter if you're doing great or bad. That's your personal business. What I like to tell to all the consumers out there is that the numbers never lie. And the data is what we have to look at when we talk about the marketplace. And what I can tell you is that this year is pretty much trailing last year. I'm seeing very, very similar status of 24 to 23. I will tell you, we are nowhere near 22. And so when we look at these stats, so we have to look at these stats with an understanding that the fourth quarter was terrible. And when you look at these Q1 numbers, you have to say some of these things, and I'm going to repeat this a bunch of times when we go over some of these numbers, is that some of these things, when you look at like market time, you're like, wow, that seems high because everything I see is selling in seconds. It's because if something closes in Q1 but was on the market in Q4, it still affects the entire market time. So remember that. And to show you how quick markets can flip, I have a great stat for you. I put this in a lot of my marketing data, but here's a great stat to look at. And this is for when people tell me like, oh, can a market really change that fast? In Q4, my entire company my team, right? For buyers and sellers. So for buyers and sellers, we had 100 showings total in Q4. Okay, we had 100 showings. In Q1, we had 2,521 showings. 2,521. 2,521 compared to 100. So when you say, hey, Matt, how quick can a market really flip? I don't know. Last time I checked, 2,521 is a hell of a lot more than 100. So as we look at these stats, know that this information comes directly from the InfoSparks, which gets its information from the multiple listing system, also known as the MLS. And we're going to cover pretty much just the heart of the downtown markets, which is the South Loop up to Lakeview, going from North Center down to the West Loop. So let's start with the first one of sales price. Sales price was up on average 10.14%. Almost, over 10%. Now, I know what you guys are saying. Hey, Matt, prices are up 10%. That's insane. Well, it's like, here's what you have to look at, is that's compared to last quarter. This isn't year over year. We're doing quarterly stats, not yearly stats, quarterly stats. So what it's saying is that, like, prices are up 10% compared to the fourth quarter. Because the fourth quarter, prices go way down, and in the first quarter, prices go way up. So when you see this and you hear 10%, don't think 10% like it's up from, last year, January, 10%. It's up from Q4 to now. It's up 10%. And we look at some good ones. The one with the highest price growth for Q1 was Lincoln Park at 25.9%. That's a darn good stat. And I will tell you, Lincoln Park, for anybody that's out there that's been looking at it or selling, has noticed that the sales price in Lincoln Park has been insane. It's been a great market. But here's one that I like. This is one that we need to see. The Loop is up 22.9% in sales price. That is phenomenal. Now, again, a lot of you guys might be like, hey, Matt, I thought you said the Loop is struggling. It is. And the prices are up over almost 23%, let's call it, because it sucked so bad in Q4. So compared to Q4, it's up almost 23%. But guess who didn't have that great of a little price growth? Guess who performed the worst? It's been the king of the north, the near north side. Gold Coast, River North, Shreveville, south part of Old Town. That's the near north side. They are down 8.3%. I think it's important to note that is the only area out of all the areas, and we'll be putting all these up, okay, that has performed at a negative number. And if you're wondering why, I will say that I think right now, still to this day, a lot of people are preferring to live in what I call the outskirts, like the Wickers, Bucks, the Lakeviews, Lincoln Parks, and that a lot of sellers are struggling to cope with the fact that their property values have come down, and it's hurting the marketplace over there. There's also not much demand, okay? So if you don't have much demand and you have excess supply, you see prices go down. So that is still the hardest hit area in the market. Now, the Loop and the New East Side used to be the hardest. Right now, near north side is going to be winning most categories. Next category to talk about, market time. Market time, on average, 84 days. Now, I know what you're going to say, guys. Hey, Matt, everything I'm seeing selling in a day. I heard these flash sales are great, right? A flash sale is a property that comes on the market and sells in 24 hours or less. So how can market time be 84 days if things are selling in a day? right? That doesn't make sense. 1 + 1 = 2. Where's 84 coming from? Well, guys, here's where 84 is coming from. If you listed in October and didn't sell, okay, and maybe you pulled it off the market for a day or a month, okay, and you put it back on, and it ends up selling in January, it eats up all that market time that it was on the market in October, okay? So if you're on the market for 30, 40 days, in December to January, and then you end up closing in March, they calculate a lot of those days. So that's where the market time is coming into effect. The highest market time, the king, again, is the near north side. Gold Coast, River North, south part of Old Town. They had 132 days. That's a lot, guys. It's a lot. Go tell your friend in, Miami that we got property sitting on the market for 132 days. See what they say to you. Go tell somebody in the North Shore you're seeing places sitting on the market for 132 days. They'll think you're crazy. The area with the least amount of days is North Center, which includes Roscoe Village. North Center had 49 days on the market, which I will tell you, if we're sitting in first week of March and you're telling me, Matt, the average market time in North Center is 49 days, you're like, Matt, that doesn't sound right. Again, guys, remember, this adds in market time from the fourth quarter. I think an important one to really look at is that the South Loop is at 123 days. They're the second highest market time. That is a big growth in market time compared to Q4 for them. So that's one to watch. Next big stat to look at, my personal favorite, months of inventory. Okay? To me, months of inventory really dictates the market. Okay? What they do is they look at how many units sold last month divided by how many units are currently active, and whatever that number equates to is how many months it takes to wipe out the current inventory levels. 4 months is balanced. 4 months is balanced, okay? Less than 4 months seller's market, more than 4 months buyer's markets. Most of America, guys, is hovering around like 5 to 6 days of inventory, okay? We finished in Q1 at a 2.75 average months of inventory. So that says what, guys? It says that we are in a seller's market. But I think it's important to note that not all areas are the same. So when somebody tells you, hey, I hear it's a great market, I hear it's a bad market, I always say, well, what are you selling and where, right? Let's look at the highest amount of months of inventory is once again the near north side at 4.9 months. So to have 4.9 months in the spring market it's horrible. It's honestly absolutely horrible. You saw what the market time was at 132 days. The fact that you have 4.9 months of inventory, that's a big stat. The lowest amount of inventory is in Lakeview, where they have 1.5 months of inventory. Lakeview has been crazy. And I think it's important to know is that I feel like the further away you get from the city, the better the market is. Because if you look at the fact that the lowest market time was in North Center, which is pretty much the farthest part from the city out of the areas that we're pulling from, and they're pretty much performing the best. I mean, they have 2.3 months of inventory, so they're not that far behind Lakeview. And if we pulled the stat for just March, if we did just March, they're like in a 1 month type of inventory, okay? And this is against, guys, this is important to know, this is all price points, everything, okay? Most of the properties that are in the outskirts are in that, low twos to high ones. Lincoln Park's 2.1, Westtown's 2.5, Logan's 2.1, Bucktown Lincoln Park's 2.2, North Center's 2.3. And then you look at the downtown markets, Loop 3.3, South Loop 3.7, West Loop 2.9. So you see the difference. The downtowns are in that 3 to 5s, and the outskirts are in that 1 to 2s. And here's something important to know. If we looked at the outskirts under $500,000, we're below a month of inventory. That's a big stat to know. So if you're like, hey Matt, every property I'm bidding on in Lincoln Park or Lakeview is selling in a day. Well, that's because you have less than a month of inventory. And then if you got a place at $500,000 in River North, you got 4.9 months of inventory. That's a big difference, guys. That's a big difference. Here's a stat I think that's important to kind of know as well. You look at the above $1 million market in the near north side, you have 13.4 months of inventory. It's crazy. Above 1.5, you're above 15 months of inventory. So when somebody tells me, hey, I hear it's a great market, I'm like, we got 15 months of inventory here, right? I pulled some stats for a couple clients that were trying to sell a place above 1.5 million in River North. And they were like, hey, Matt, we're not getting many showings. What's going on? And I looked at how many properties closed in like a pretty large segment of like the heart of River North, above 1.5. and only one property closed all year that was a not brand new construction that went under contract this year and sold. One. Think about that. One. That's terrible. So again, when we look at numbers, we also have to understand that these numbers, although they don't lie, we can make them work for us the way we want to. What I'm portraying here is generalization of numbers of what's happening in the overall macro marketplace. But you always want to look at the micro segments of what you're looking at and what you're buying because, that can really show you a fuller picture of what you're looking for. Let's look at closings. Closings were down 6.82%. So if somebody's like, hey, I'm killing it this year, maybe you're just having a good year. Hats off to you out there if you're crushing this year. Good for you. I like to see people succeed. I'm not here to watch people fail. But what I can tell you, as a whole, if you're like, hey, Matt, how are closings doing? I'm like, well, they were down 6.82% this quarter, right? And that's compared to a bad quarter. That's just what we have to look at. Now, my sales are literally, my closed sales personally are down $2 million year over year, closed sales. My pending sales, year over year, are up about 15%. So I'm up in pending, but down in closed. I mean, I don't know what it is. Maybe some other people are like this, but my April is going to be one of my best Aprils ever. But my March was good, not great. I felt like I had a lot of people who wanted a late closing. I put a ton of people under contract in January that didn't close till April. So maybe that's why this closings, right? I just look at my own stats. I'm like, well, maybe that's why closings is down a little bit. I feel like second quarter closing stats are going to be way up because I think a lot of people close later. And it's important to note that a lot of people didn't close till March. So it kind of affects these closings. Now, let's look at who had the lowest amount of closings, and that's going to be in North Center, Roscoe Village. They're down 31.4% for closings. Now, you may say, hey, Matt, if North Center is down 31.4%, that must mean they're doing really bad. But here's the thing, guys. They have really low amount of inventory, so they had less closings because they don't have as much product to sell. So if there's not much product on the market and there's not much to sell, then you can't have as many closings. The place that performed the best is Bucktown Wicker Park was up 15.3%. So they're up 15.3%. That's a solid closing growth. Now, since we've been picking on near North area, let's also take a look at that. Their closings were up 6.2%. So they're closed. Now you're like, hey, man, their prices are down and their amounts of inventory is up. Why their price? Why are their closings up? Well, they got the most amount of inventory, so of course it's going to have more closings. When you got these low inventory areas, they're going to have lower amount of closings. Somebody else that was way down was the West Loop. They're down 24%. I think the West Loop, which I classify as one of the downtown markets, is performing much better than I have seen since the pandemic. You guys have to remember the West Loop was named one of the hottest areas to live in the country, pre-pandemic. It won the hottest neighborhood ever in 16, 17, 18. I remember pre-pandemic in 16, 17, 18, 19, that if somebody would even smell I had something coming up at 901 Madison, you even heard, I'd get 50 offers on it. That same mentality right now is in Lincoln Park and Lakeview. So we have to remember, history repeats itself. Will Fulton Market, West Loop come back? I see cranes there. I see businesses continuing to move there. I see some of the coolest restaurants open in there. I don't know. I would just suspect that people, if they're working there and they like to eat there, I'm thinking they'll want to live there. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. So I think West Loop's going to be one to watch all year as more and more businesses and restaurants continue to flood that area to see what's that stat look like. So this is how I dissect the market, guys. I look at this information, and now I just do these little podcast videos for you guys, and I do them quarterly. And full disclosure that these quarterly stats that I do are my lowest viewed videos that I do. So if you're still watching this, thank you, because not many people do. But the reason I put these out there is because there are some people out there that like to see the numbers. And if you actually want to know what the numbers are to understand where the market's heading, you want to watch something like this that gives you accurate information of what the data is. And what I do to try to predict markets, when a lot of people are like, Matt, how do you know where the market's going to head? Well, I'm like, well, I look at these numbers on a weekly basis. And I sit there and I dissect where it's going, and then I look at the closings, and I look where the prices are going, and then I talk to my clients, and there's a guy that's got the biggest market share in the city. I talk with my clients and say, hey, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? Blah, 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 and do that 100 times a day. and then I'm looking at the numbers, and then I'm studying what's happening in the economy, then I'm studying what's happening in the stock market, then I'm studying what's happening in the politics, then I'm studying what's happening across the world, and then I try to make a calculated guess of what I'm seeing, feeling, hearing, and looking at the stats to predict where the market's going to go. But that's why the numbers are important. So for the people who are bored by this, I apologize. But for the people who are not, I will tell you that these numbers mean a big difference. So what do I think is going to happen in the second quarter? I think second quarter is going to be amazing. I think Q2 is going to post some really big numbers. I know that we're doing very well, but I also know that every agent I'm talking to is saying they're doing very well starting Q2 as well. So I think Q2's numbers are going to be great. There's some big things that are going to happen towards the end of Q2. The settlement, which we'll talk about the settlement in our next podcast. We'll do a little bit of an update for you guys. And then we're also going to start seeing the election, which we will also be doing a podcast on 2 podcasts from now, how the election will affect the market, and then an update of what's actually happening with the election. But those will be the 2 big trends to watch in Q2, is how's the settlement going to start affecting the marketplace? How's the politics going to affect the marketplace? Oh, how did I forget? How do the rates affect the marketplace? Didn't they promise us 4 rate cuts? Now we're down to 3 rate cuts. Now they're saying maybe no rate cuts. Don't you love the politics? So those 3 things are going to be what we're going to want to watch. I don't know. A lot of people have been asking me, do I expect Fed rate cuts? I expected them a long time ago. I really had a conspiracy theory that the Feds would cut the rates, and they did in the first part of the year, and then they kind of stopped. So more to come on that. I got a whole conspiracy podcast coming on about the Fed rates cuts as well. So this is it for today, guys. Thanks for listening to my boring numbers, but it's important to understand the numbers to predict the future. I'm Matt Laricy. Thanks for listening to Laricy Live.